Well, this plan for the self-employed is probably a bit more generous than some people had been expecting. The total cost is thought to be about 9 billion over 3 months. How many months, of course, it has to roll out over is a moot point. Nobody really knows the answer to that. Now we know what the government is planning to do for people affected by the crisis. I think you can see who's worst off, and it's the people who've actually lost their jobs. Those people who are in the long online queue for universal credit, and those people who have lost hours. The other stuff that happened today, as you've been saying, we saw the police deploying powers on the streets, stopping people, checkpoints, effectively, to ask people why they were going about their business and should they actually be indoors. And we saw an attempt, how much of one is a moot point again, at international cooperation, the teleconference of the G20. They resolved to do whatever it takes, but it is far from clear that they have actually come to any hard commitments. A far cry from 2008, when the G20 played a big role. One other point on international cooperation: Britain was asked a while ago if it would like to join the EU countries in trying to procure ventilators and other important kit for hospital staff. And Britain didn't join that. There's been some puzzlement about that, some people suggesting it was because of ideology. And today the government is saying, no, it wasn't that, it was just an email went astray, which is odd because the EU announced this scheme in public. It could have had some very big impact on being able to buy stuff. If you've got 28 countries, that's a very big purchaser knocking around the system. It could have made the buying of things easier. And we have more than 100 officials sitting in Brussels who just stare at the EU, watching what is going on there. So some puzzlement about that as we come towards the end of the third full day of the shutdown. Many of Britain's 5 million self-employed work in the jobs most affected by the COVID-19 shutdown. But they've been waiting to hear how the government will support them in this crisis.
It's been very, very difficult. We had to close the firm down mainly because people don't want you inside their house. Got no work initially and no work to go on to, which is even more frightening.
Many, like decorator Desmond Cass, desperately need cash. And today the government announced what it's going to try to do to keep these workers fed and their businesses viable.
Musicians and sound engineers, plumbers and electricians, taxi drivers and driving instructors, hairdressers and childminders, and many others, through no fault of their own, risk losing their livelihoods. To you, I say this: you have not been forgotten. We will not let you behind. We all stand together. Today, I'm announcing a new self-employed income support scheme. The government will pay self-employed people who have been adversely affected by the coronavirus a taxable grant worth 80% of their average monthly profits over the last 3 years, up to £2,500 a month. This scheme will be open to people across the UK for at least 3 months, and I will extend it for longer if necessary.
The Chancellor said the scheme might not be up and running until June. Until then, the self-employed might have to join the massive online queue for universal credit. The Chancellor signalled in return for this support from the state, the self-employed might one day lose their lower rate of national insurance.
But I must be honest and point out that in devising this scheme, in response to many calls for support, it is now much harder to justify the inconsistent contributions between people of different employment statuses.
This is a very generous package for the self-employed. In many respects, it's more generous than for employees because they can get up to 80% of £2,500 a month, even if they continue to earn something. This will cost a lot of money. We don't know how much, but maybe something like £10 billion over the next 3 months.
I think it will not be so good for those members maybe who haven't done a full year's self-employed working and they haven't got a self-attachment form to send in to the taxman. But I think most of the members will be quite pleased that this support is there for them. And I'm sure that the threshold of £50,000 will cover the bulk of our members.
We are all in this together. Thank you.
This completes for now the emergency economic plan. The government paying wages across the economy, a world away from the levers reached for in the last global economic crisis of 2008.
This isn't a matter of stimulating the economy, which is language that has been used on both sides of the Atlantic. It's to do with preserving almost the very existence of society and the economy as we know it, which is a slightly melodramatic way of putting it, but I think is closer to the truth.
The G20 world leaders met by video link at midday, committing themselves to a global effort and a united response against the virus. But the Ministry of Defence revealed that President Putin's Navy has chosen this moment of crisis to test British resilience in the English Channel and the North Sea. The Royal Navy sent 9 vessels to monitor 7 Russian ships sailing around British waters. On land, the police were stopping cars in some counties to check on whether those out and about were breaching the ban on non-essential travel.
Right, not really what you should be doing. It's not an essential journey. Okay.
As of today, the police had powers to issue on-the-spot £60 fines, where they think they're necessary.
As of today, the police have enforcement powers, and those powers involve the ability to level a fine, and that fine will increase if people do not comply and do not pay that fine on time. And that will be based under the fixed penalty notice and the regulations that are now coming into place today.
Billions were added today to the economic cost of the shutdown. How much higher the bill goes will be decided by the course of the pandemic few here had heard of only 3 months ago.